Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take stacks of knowledge articles, research papers, biographical sketches, and distill them into pure, actionable insight, specially tailored for you. Today, we're opening up the vault on a figure who fundamentally changed how money works for the average person. This isn't just a story about a successful financial executive. It's a deep dive into the founder of the Vanguard Group, John C. Bogle, the man who popularized the single most disruptive, wealth-creating invention in modern investing history, the index fund.
It's such a crucial deep dive because Bogle's philosophy, this idea that you should not try to beat the market but simply capture its returns, it sounds so profoundly simple now.
Right.
But at the time, it was fundamentally radical. I mean, Wall Street was built on the exact opposite premise, that active management and high fees were the only way to get superior results. Bogle's entire life and career, including what he considered his greatest professional failure, funneled into this one elegant, low-cost solution. And we've been completely immersed in a comprehensive biographical sketch detailing his life, his career, his revolutionary philosophy, and, his personal struggles. Our mission is pretty clear: to understand how his unique background and a massive career mistake led him to fundamentally change global finance, saving individual investors what are often cited as literally trillions of dollars.
Trillions! It's an incredible number. And what's fascinating here is that Bogle's philosophy was pure heresy when he launched it. He preached investment over speculation, long-term patience over short-term action.
And costs. Above all else, costs.
A maniacal focus on reducing broker and management costs. His ideal vehicle was a low-cost index fund representing the entire U.S. market, held over a lifetime with dividends reinvested. It's a philosophy so undeniably sound now that the great Warren Buffett paid him the ultimate tribute.
What did he say?
He said Bogle did more for the individual investor than anyone he knows. Wow. Okay, let's unpack this revolution. And we have to start right where it all began, under the crushing weight of the Great Depression. So John Clifton Bogle was born in 1929. I mean, you couldn't ask for a more symbolic start to the life of a financial reformer.
No, the timing is almost poetic, isn't it? The precise year the stock market crashed. But it wasn't just symbolic. It was the immediate, profound, and devastating influence on his family's finances and their whole structure. His Scottish-American family was initially quite well off, but the crash...
He wiped them out.
It cost them everything they had accumulated. We're talking about a transition from comfort and stability to complete economic ruin, and all during the most impressionable years of his childhood.
That experience, that kind of trauma of witnessing wealth to evaporate, it must have indelibly shaped his priorities.
Oh, absolutely.
When you see your family lose everything, the idea of paying someone high fees for just the chance of beating the market, it must seem insane.
Intolerable. It instills this deep-seated appreciation for frugality and a lifelong, almost obsessive focus on minimizing costs and preserving your capital.
Absolutely. The sources paint a pretty painful picture of the personal impact, too. It wasn't just financial.
No, it was deeply personal. His father, William Yates Bogle Jr., kind of crumbled under the pressure and the financial losses, which tragically led him to alcoholism.
And that resulted in his parents' divorce.
Yes. So think about the emotional and financial instability that placed on young John and his twin brother, David. He didn't just learn about the Depression in a history book. He lived the consequence of market instability firsthand.
That's such a heavy weight for a child, but it also explains the core of his later mission, doesn't it? He spent his career trying to build a stable, reliable structure for ordinary people.
Exactly. To ensure they would never have to face that kind of sudden, catastrophic loss his own family endured. The economic reality of his childhood truly defined his later career goal: stability, safety, and guaranteed participation in economic growth.
Fortunately, Bogle and his brother David showed tremendous academic promise.
They did. They managed to transfer to Blair Academy, which is a very prestigious...
They earned it.
They earned it. And Bogle was noted for this incredible aptitude for mathematics and computation, skills that would obviously be central to his career. He graduated cum laude in 1947 and then went on to Princeton to study economics and investment.
And this is really where the academic groundwork for the index fund begins, years before the concept was even commercialized. He spent a huge portion of his undergraduate time on his senior thesis.
Yes, and we need to pause on this because it's a legendary piece of academic work in the financial world. He dedicated his entire junior and senior years to researching and writing just a staggering 130-page senior thesis.
A 130-page undergraduate thesis on finance in the early 1950s. That kind of dedication isn't just academic. It signals a profound, almost obsessive interest in the mechanics of the industry.
It does. The title was The Economic Role of the Investment Company.
So what did he cover in it?
He essentially conducted one of the first comprehensive analytical studies of the mutual fund industry. He detailed its structure, he analyzed its performance, and critically, he began to think about how it should optimally function.
So he was already asking the big questions.
He was asking huge questions. Are these companies serving the investor, or are they serving themselves? Is the structure efficient? This wasn't abstract theory. He was directly studying the cost drag and the structural inefficiencies in the mutual fund world of the time.
And that depth and insight paid off immediately. The sources confirmed that this thesis was literally his ticket into the industry.
It was. He was hired by Walter L. Morgan, the highly respected founder of the Wellington Fund, reportedly because Morgan read the entire 130-page document.
That's incredible. Imagine the confidence that must have given him.
Right. Fresh out of Princeton, he already had a framework for analyzing the entire industry, and the industry's leaders recognized its value. So he started at Wellington after graduating magna cum laude in 1951. He moved up fast, became assistant manager by 1955.
He was on the conventional path to success, and succeeding wildly.
He was. And he had the opportunity to really analyze Wellington's internal investment department at this time, and he spotted a strategic weakness.
What was that?
Wellington had historically focused on managing a single diversified fund. The Bogle, recognizing the evolving market, he saw the need for product diversification to capture different investor segments.
So he pushed for change.
He did. He successfully persuaded management to create a new fund, which proved to be a pivotal early victory in his career. He had skill and conviction in traditional active management. He climbed steadily through the ranks and eventually replaced Morgan himself as chairman of Wellington's mutual funds in 1970.
So he was on the path to becoming a revered Wall Street legend, following the traditional rules of the game until he broke them. And his career just shattered. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the greatest revolution in finance was catalyzed by Bogle's greatest professional downfall. Let's set the scene. He's at the height of his power at Wellington, chairman of the mutual funds.
And then he made what he later called an extremely unwise move.
The narrative turning point.
This is it. In the early 1970s, Bogle approved a merger that proved to be just disastrous. The specifics are less important than the outcome. Bogle was eventually fired from Wellington for approving it, a terrible public professional setback.
It's so rare to hear a financial titan speak about failure with that kind of brutal candor. He was quoted later saying the mistake was shameful and inexcusable and a reflection of immaturity and confidence.
Beyond what the facts justified. Yeah, he owned it completely.
He did.
But he also maintained this incredible ability to extract wisdom from pain. He famously added, "The great thing about that mistake was that I learned a lot. And that learning experience, that moment of being humbled, was the crucible that forged the whole Vanguard structure."
But the immediate consequence of the firing, the actual terms of his departure, that's what fundamentally mattered to the birth of Vanguard.
Precisely. The terms of his departure stipulated that he was prohibited from managing money directly on behalf of clients. He could no longer be the active manager picking stocks and trying to beat the market for fees.
Wait, so the legal restriction, the penalty for his mistake, is what inadvertently forced him to innovate beyond the scope of traditional management. That's an astonishing twist of fate.
It is the ultimate irony. Because he could not actively pick stocks or exercise that kind of direct oversight on portfolio decisions, he had to find an investment vehicle that was, in essence, self-managing.
And that was the index fund.
The index solution was born directly out of that constraint. Think about it. Active management requires skill, research, subjective decision-making about what to buy, what to sell, and when.
It requires direct oversight.
It requires direct active oversight. But if a fund simply mirrors an external, publicly known index like the S&P 500, just buying every stock in the right proportion and rarely trading, it removes the need for that subjective decision-making.
It becomes a passive, mechanical process.
Exactly, a replication process. And that structure circumvented the legal prohibition against direct active management. It turned a legal penalty into a profound competitive advantage.
So he took this massive professional failure, founded the Vanguard Group in 1974, and set out to launch this revolutionary new concept.
And Vanguard, as we know, became one of the most successful and respected investment companies globally. But its start was anything but successful. It was humble and met with outright hostility.
Right. In 1975, he introduced the first index investment trust, the precursor to the famous Vanguard 500 index fund. And it was met with immediate visceral derision from the financial establishment.
And that's where the famous nickname came from, Bogle's Folly.
Bogle's Folly. They hated it.
They absolutely hated it. Critics coined the term, and the whole passive approach was often derided as un-American by the existing investment industry.
Un-American.
Because Wall Street was built on the promise of active management, the promise of beating the market, and collecting high commissions and fees for that perceived expertise. Bogle was arguing that this entire promise was fundamentally flawed, ineffective, and often detrimental to you, the investor. He was attacking the industry's economic lifeblood.
And it's important to clarify, as we noted in the sources, that Bogle didn't invent the academic concept of the index fund, but he certainly commercialized it effectively. Where did that intellectual foundation really come from?
It developed primarily in the 1960s, largely among financial economists, particularly those at the University of Chicago. They were running these sophisticated studies and finding overwhelming evidence.
What was the evidence?
That professional money managers found it extremely difficult, if not statistically impossible, to consistently pick winning stocks that would perform better than the broad market average over the long term.
And the key was the cost drag. We need to really emphasize that for you,
Yeah.
because it's the mathematical truth he hammered home.
It is the mathematical certainty. Even if a manager was smart enough to beat the market by a little bit one year, those high transaction costs and management fees, often 1 to 2% annually, would immediately pull the net return below the market average.
So the active manager was fighting a losing battle against guaranteed costs.
Exactly. The math was conclusive, so the evidence pointed to passive being mathematically superior, but no one had successfully packaged it cheaply for the masses.
And that was Bogle's contribution.
It was. We should acknowledge that Rex Sinquefield actually established the very first index fund available to the general public slightly earlier in 1973. However, Bogle's major contribution was the launch of his S&P 500 fund in 1975, designed specifically to achieve higher returns through substantially lower costs.
And he built the structure of Vanguard itself to enforce that.
That's the key. He structured Vanguard so the funds are owned by you, the investors. That enforces the low-cost mandate, something a traditional for-profit management company could never truly guarantee. This structural focus on cost reduction is what truly changed everything.
And he gained powerful academic allies along the way.
He did. The Nobel laureate economist Paul Samuelson, whose work deeply influenced Bogle's own thinking, later ranked the Bogle invention, along with the invention of the wheel, the alphabet, Gutenberg printing.
Wow. That's a monumental comparison for a financial product.
It captures the gravity of the change perfectly. The index fund didn't just offer an investment product. It democratized investment returns. It made the entire growth of the market accessible to ordinary individuals without needing specialized, high-cost knowledge. It was a transfer of wealth from Wall Street back to Main Street.
Okay, now we get to the philosophy itself. Bogle didn't just sell low-cost funds. He sold a worldview, which he distilled in his best-selling book, Common Sense on Mutual Funds. And his work is built on this really clear, often blunt distinction, which he called the clash of the cultures.
Right, the difference between investment and speculation.
And he felt the speculative culture was dangerously flooding the financial markets.
Yeah, turning it into a casino rather than a capital formation system. He drew a hard line in the sand.
Okay, let's spend some time on this because it's so central to understanding why his rules work. How did he define the difference?
For Bogle, investment is focused on the long term. It's concerned with capturing returns from the underlying productive capacity of a business. When you invest, you are buying a fractional share of a company that manufactures goods, delivers services, earns profits, and pays dividends.
You're focused on the business itself.
Exactly. You're focused on the business's cash flows, its productivity, its future value over decades, with a goal of lower risk of capital destruction. It's like buying a farm. You care about the annual harvest.
And speculation.
Speculation is the antithesis. It's focused exclusively on the short term and inherently involves high, potentially destructive risk. The speculator is concerned only with the security's price, where it's going next, not the underlying fundamental value.
So it's driven by emotion.
It's driven by what Bogle famously called hope, fear, and greed. The speculator isn't buying the farm, they're just betting on whether the price of the deed will go up tomorrow. He noted that while a business's cash flow might be steady and predictable over years, the market prices are anything but, precisely because those speculative forces are driving them wildly up and down.
That distinction is crucial because it frames his entire argument for the superiority of index funds. Active managers are forced to play the speculation game, right?
Exactly. Active management tries to win the game of speculation by guessing which price will move next. Indexing bypasses that game entirely. It embraces the concept that over the long term, the only true return comes from the underlying business's growth and dividends, the investment return, not the speculative one.
And he continually argued that it is statistically impossible to consistently pick actively managed mutual funds that will beat a low-cost index fund over the long term.
That's right. And again, the key is the cost drag. It is the mathematical certainty. Active funds typically charge annual management fees that range from 1% to 2% or even higher, plus they have high transaction costs from frequent trading.
That's a guaranteed annual drain on your capital, regardless of performance.
It's guaranteed. If the average market return is, say, 8%, and you pay 2% in fees, you are guaranteed to receive only 6%. And that 2% difference, compounded over 40 years, means you lose a monumental portion of your potential wealth.
It's compounding working against you.
Exactly. A passive index fund, by contrast, might charge only 0.04% or 0.10% in difference. That means millions to you, the investor, over a lifetime.
So the philosophy boils down to a few surprisingly simple rules for the average person. We have Bogle's famous 8 basic rules for investors. These are the core takeaways for you if you want to adopt sound, durable investing habits. Let's walk through these.
Right. And these 8 rules emphasize the discipline, patience, and maniacal cost control that are the foundation of true wealth building.
Okay, so what's rule number 1?
Rule 1. Select low-cost funds. This is foundational and non-negotiable. Bogle's famous quote was, "In the investment world, you get what you don't pay for."
It's the whole ball game.
It is. Costs are certain, returns are not. The lower the cost, the higher your net return. If you have 2 identical S&P 500 funds, and one charges 1% and the other charges 0.05%, that difference will mean hundreds of thousands of dollars lost to fees over a lifetime. It is the single biggest determinant of long-term success.
Rule 2. Consider carefully the added costs of advice. This is critical in an industry where the word advice can mean a lot of different things.
Exactly. Bogle recognized that advice often comes with hidden fees, or worse, it involves steering you towards high-cost products that benefit the advisor's commission, not your portfolio.
This is where he constantly pushed for the fiduciary standard.
Constantly. If you seek advice, you must ensure the advisor is legally bound to act in your best interest, a fiduciary obligation, and that the cost of that advice doesn't erode the very returns they are helping you seek. Many advisors operate under the lesser suitability standard, which just means the product has to be technically suitable for you, even if a cheaper, better alternative exists. Bogle saw that as a fundamental conflict of interest.
Rule 3. Do not overrate past fund performance. We are constantly bombarded with ads touting funds that delivered spectacular returns last year. Bogle warned against chasing those.
That's right. Past performance is not indicative of future results because markets are cyclical and they mean revert. A fund that performed spectacularly last year might have just gotten lucky or taken an unsustainable amount of risk.
And investors who chase those high returns,
they inevitably buy at the top, only to see the fund revert back to the mean or severely underperform the next year. It's a guaranteed way to buy high and sell low.
Okay, but then rule 4 is use past performance to determine consistency and risk. That provides the necessary nuance, right?
It does. While you shouldn't chase high returns, reviewing a fund's historical performance is useful for gauging its volatility and consistency. Did the manager hold steady during downturns? Does its behavior align with your risk tolerance? It's a measure of discipline, not a prediction of future success.
And rule 5, beware of stars, as in star mutual fund managers. This connects right back to the folly of speculation and celebrity worship.
It does. Managers who become famous often suffer from an almost unavoidable fate, asset bloat. When billions of dollars flood into their fund, it becomes incredibly difficult to execute large trades quickly without moving the price of the stock itself.
They lose their nimbleness.
They lose their nimbleness, and often they lose their edge. Bogle fundamentally believed that no single individual, no matter how talented, should be betting your future on. Their genius is fleeting. The market's return is permanent.
Which is very related to Rule 6, beware of asset size.
Closely related. When a fund becomes too large, say tens or hundreds of billions, it can become incredibly sluggish. It might be forced to buy stocks it doesn't really want just to deploy capital, or it incurs higher transaction costs executing massive trades. For Bogle, bigger often meant slower and less efficient.
Rule 7, don't own too many funds. This speaks to the simplicity mandate. We often feel safer if we have dozens of specialized funds, tech, emerging markets, gold, whatever.
But if you own dozens of specialized funds, you are likely just reintroducing complexity, increasing the risk of overlapping assets, and multiplying the fees. You risk diversifying away from the overall market return without realizing it, turning your disciplined portfolio back into a complex, speculative game.
And finally, the famous Bogle mantra, the culmination of his entire philosophy.
Rule 8. Buy your fund portfolio and hold it. This is the antidote to the behavioral mistakes driven by that hope, fear, and greed. Discipline and patience are absolutely crucial. Once you have a sensible, diversified, low-cost portfolio, the best strategy is often to set it and forget it. Let compounding interest work its magic without interference from your own emotions or market noise.
Market timing is a fool's errand.
For most people, absolutely.
Bogle didn't just preach long-term discipline. He even developed a remarkably simple yet reliable method for forecasting long-term returns for decade-long periods. For you, the learner, this is an invaluable tool for grounding your expectations in reality.
It's a fundamentally conservative approach based on economic drivers, explicitly ignoring short-term market sentiment. He estimated decade-long stock returns by breaking the return into 3 core components.
What's the first one?
First, the existing dividend yield. This is the cash flow you receive immediately as a shareholder. If the market is currently yielding 2%, that's your starting point.
Okay, simple enough.
Second, expected earnings growth. This is the anticipated increase in the underlying company's profits. Historically, this has been around 5 to 6% annually for the S&P 500.
So you add those two together.
Right, and that gives you the fundamental investment return. But then, critically, you must adjust for overall market valuation.
The P/E ratio adjustment. This is where many investors go wrong, right? Believing high valuations will continue forever.
Precisely. PE stands for price to earnings, how much you're willing to pay for every dollar of company earnings. If the market is currently valued extremely high, say a PE of 30, future returns will likely be lower, as that high valuation must eventually contract back to the historical mean. That contraction is a headwind.
And the reverse is true if the market is cheap.
Exactly. If the market has a low PE, the valuation expansion acts as a tailwind, boosting returns. This adjustment forces you to be realistic and recognize that high prices today steal returns from tomorrow.
It's a powerful tool because it forces you to look at the market not as a magic box of ever-increasing prices, but as a collection of businesses.
That's it. And while Bogle was the champion of stock market indexing, he was also keenly aware that not everyone can tolerate 100% stock volatility. He stressed the crucial risk-reducing role of bonds in a portfolio.
He recommended a minimum 20% bond allocation for most investors, correct?
Yes. That minimum 20% bond allocation acts as a necessary buffer. Bonds are generally non-correlated or negatively correlated to stocks during times of stress. So when stocks crash, quality bonds often hold their value or even rise, providing stability.
His overall strategy was dynamic, though.
It was. You should tend to increase your bond allocation as you age, given a shorter time horizon. He also recommended increasing bonds when stocks become fundamentally overvalued using his forecasting model. But he maintained that investors should never completely exit the growth engine of the market, advocating you maintain at least a 20% stock allocation.
And we have that fantastic, famous anecdote that validates his timing and common sense approach during the dot-com bubble.
He was one of the few voices of reason at the time. He used his simple forecasting model and correctly anticipated the poor returns on stocks during the late 1990s dot-com era. He saw the speculative mania driving PE ratios to unsustainable levels.
What did he do?
He acted defensively. He sold most of his stocks before the bubble burst and correctly anticipated superior returns from bonds over the subsequent decade. This shows his strategy was not rigid. It was based on common sense valuation and risk management.
It's the ultimate example of investment discipline winning out over speculative fervor. It's so important to talk about the man behind the revolution because Bogle's professional battles were mirrored by serious, intense personal health challenges throughout his adult life.
His health struggles were significant and began very early. He suffered his first of several cardiac arrests at the young age of 31.
Wow, at 31.
Yeah. This was compounded by a formal diagnosis at age 38 of arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia, a rare and serious heart muscle disorder. Imagine trying to revolutionize global finance while knowing your time on Earth might be dramatically limited.
Despite that, he continued to build Vanguard into a global powerhouse. The health issues did force him to relinquish his CEO role in 1996, but here's where the narrative takes a truly dramatic turn.
He received a successful heart transplant that year at the age of 66, and the sources emphasized that he was considered past the age for a healthy heart transplant.
So it was a massive medical longshot that paid off.
It was. It granted him another 2 decades to continue his mission as an advocate for the investor. But this second lease on life coincided with a profound internal conflict at Vanguard, the company he founded. He had carefully handpicked his successor, John J. Brennan.
But the relationship soured pretty quickly after the transplant, didn't it? It became a battle for the soul of the company.
It did. After the successful surgery, Bogle returned, taking the title of senior chairman. However, his vision for Vanguard's future, its ultra-low-cost, almost non-profit mission, began to clash with Brennan's desire to expand the firm's offerings.
Which Bogle feared would reintroduce complexity and higher fees.
Exactly. This led to significant operational conflict. The internal clash ultimately resulted in Bogle being forced to leave the operational company in 1999.
So he was effectively pushed out of the very company he founded.
He was. But Bogle being Bogle, he simply relocated to the Bogle Financial Markets Research Center, a small research institute located right on the Vanguard campus. This provided him a continued, independent, bully pulpit from which he could advocate tirelessly for investor interests and critique the industry, including Vanguard itself.
It's the ultimate paradox of his success. The index fund became so popular that later in life, Bogle actually began to worry about the dangerous side effects of his own invention.
This warning is perhaps the most profound and future-focused part of his legacy. Bogle expressed serious, specific concerns that the massive popularity of passive indexing would lead to an undue and dangerous concentration of corporate voting power.
Can you elaborate on the mechanism here? Why does indexing create concentration?
Because index funds must own everything. The 3 largest investment firms, Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street, who dominate the indexing space, end up holding massive blocks of shares across every major publicly traded company in America.
So they become the single largest shareholders in most of corporate America.
That's it. Controlling votes on everything from executive compensation to climate change policy. Bogle worried that this immense concentrated power held in just 3 hands could potentially be used without sufficient accountability, creating a new form of systemic risk.
He had a quote about that, right?
He was quoted stating clearly, "I do not believe that such a concentration would serve the national interest." It was a warning from the champion of passive investing that even the best systems can create new, unintended risks that require vigilance.
This independent, fiercely contrarian voice extended directly into his political and regulatory stances as well. The sources detail a very interesting political classification for him.
He was a self-described Teddy Roosevelt Republican. And for those who don't know, Teddy Roosevelt was famous for his trust-busting policies and a strong progressive approach to regulation aimed at breaking up monopolies and ensuring fair competition.
The antithesis of laissez-faire capitalism.
Right. Bogle was a Republican in his commitment to free markets and individual enterprise, but a populist and regulator in his commitment to stable, fair systems that protected the little guy.
And his voting record definitely reflected this prioritization of integrity and systemic health over strict party loyalty.
Absolutely. He was highly critical of what he saw as the U.S. government's insufficient regulation in the financial sector. His voting record confirmed his independence. He voted for Bill Clinton, Barack Obama twice, and Hillary Clinton. For him, the candidate who best represented the principles of stable governance trumped partisan lines.
And he didn't just criticize. He actively advocated for specific regulatory changes.
He advocated tirelessly. He strongly supported measures like the Volcker Rule, designed to restrict banks from making speculative bets with client money, and he pushed for tighter rules on money market funds.
He also went further, proposing major reforms to curb speculation itself.
He did. He advocated for taxes designed to discourage short-term trading, limits on leverage, greater transparency for complex financial derivatives, and crucially, stricter punishments for white-collar financial crimes.
The ultimate hill he died on, professionally speaking, was the fight for that unified fiduciary standard.
It was his magnum opus in regulatory advocacy. He tirelessly pushed for a unified fiduciary standard for all money managers. This means everyone who manages your money should be legally bound to act solely in your best financial interest, placing your needs above their own commissions. Bogle believed that without this standard, the industry was inherently conflicted.
And that independent view held firm even towards the very end. In 2017, he assessed President Donald Trump's economic policies.
Right. He stated that while they might be beneficial for the stock market in the short term, he believed they were dangerous for society as a whole in the long term. He consistently looked beyond the quarterly earnings report and focused on underlying systemic and social health.
It demonstrates a man whose principles transcended immediate market fluctuations.
Absolutely. He was focused on the long-term well-being of the nation's economy, not just his portfolio.
Beyond his revolutionary business model and his relentless advocacy, Bogle also practiced immense personal generosity, reflecting those early Depression-era values. What do the sources tell us about his philanthropy?
Despite achieving considerable personal wealth, his net worth was estimated at around $80 million. He never deviated from his commitment to giving back. During his high-earning years at Vanguard, he regularly gave away half of his high salary to charity.
Half his salary. That's remarkable given the culture of wealth accumulation on Wall Street.
It is. He established the Bogle Brothers Scholars Program at Blair Academy in 1968, the school that gave him his start. And this program has assisted nearly 200 students with work-study scholarships. He reportedly delighted in meeting these scholars annually.
That's amazing.
He also established the Armstrong Foundation in 1991, and through this foundation, Bogle channeled his wealth back into the institutions that defined his life: the schools, the hospitals that fixed his heart, his church, and the United Way.
And he had the perfect, quote, summarizing his financial values, a statement that stands in direct opposition to the Wall Street speculator.
My only regret about money is that I don't have more to give away.
Wow.
That truly summarizes the paradox of Bogle. He became wealthy by teaching others how to stay frugal, and he viewed wealth not as an end in itself, but primarily as a tool for altruism and systemic improvement.
John C. Bogle died in 2019 at the age of 89. His undeniable impact on the financial world was recognized widely. He was named one of the investment industry's 4 giants of the 20th century by Fortune magazine.
And we circle back to that tribute from the most successful investor in modern history, Warren Buffett, who said, "Jack did more for American investors as a whole than any individual I've known."
His philosophy lives on.
It does. Not only in the colossal size of Vanguard, but through investor education movements like the Bobleheads Forum and the John C. Bogle Center for Financial Literacy.
So what does this all mean? The deep dive into John C. Bogle reveals this remarkable, almost cinematic trajectory. He took the immense personal and professional shame of a massive career mistake, a firing, and turned that constraint into the structural advantage that ultimately benefited millions of investors.
He proved unequivocally that simplicity and fanatic cost control will almost always beat complexity and high ambition.
His legacy is the democratization of investment returns.
It is. Bogle taught us a critical lesson. The true enemy of the investor is not market volatility or a sudden economic downturn. It is the high costs and, perhaps even more damaging, the behavioral mistakes driven by that speculative cycle of hope, fear, and greed.
By taking the emotion out of investing and minimizing the cost drag, he guaranteed the average person could, over a lifetime, capture their fair share of market growth.
And provide a stability he himself lacked in childhood.
Before we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought, something for you to mull over that builds directly on Bogle's later life warnings.
Bogle, the champion of passive investing, issued a serious systemic warning late in his life. The very success of indexing would inevitably lead to an undue concentration of corporate voting power in the hands of just 3 firms: Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street.
So the question is this: if the simplest, most efficient investment strategy becomes the biggest shareholder in nearly every company, what new, subtle risks does that create for the future of corporate governance?
If 3 firms essentially control the voting power for corporate America, how should you, the investor, monitor and address this unprecedented concentration of power to ensure accountability and competition remain intact? That's a crucial question for the next generation of investors to grapple with.